Hello everyone, my name is William, aka the Swedish Polyglot, and in this video I will convey a few useful ideas about goal setting as it relates to language learning. Now, if or when I set goals in language learning, I tend to apply the so-called SMART model of goal setting. And this is a very common model used for goal setting in many different contexts, so you've probably heard about it before at some point. So what I will do in this video is that I will start by going through the different components and aspects of the theory, and in the process applying it to language learning. In the end, I will also make a few additions or caveats to the theory that I think cover for a few of the limitations with the theory. Now, SMART in this context is an abbreviation for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And according to this theory, some goals are better than others in terms of how they are defined. So, starting with the first principle, we want our goals to be specific rather than general. So, according to this theory, a goal such as listen to Japanese for a total of 200 hours would be superior to a more general and abstract goal, such as get really good at Japanese listening comprehension. Furthermore, we want our goals or hypotheses to be measurable. We want to be able to definitely say whether or not a goal has been completed or whether or not our hypothesis has been confirmed. So the goal, listen to Japanese for a total of 200 hours, is better than the goal, listen to a lot of Japanese, since we could in theory measure if we have listened for a total of 200 hours, while in contrast, a lot of Japanese is not really something that we can measure. In future videos, I will cover easy and effective ways of measuring/tracking different language learning variables, such as hours of listening, quantity of reading, etc., etc. The third point is that we want our goals to be attainable, or rather, we want our goals to be challenging yet attainable. Now, what is attainable will obviously depend on individual differences. For me personally, taking our previously mentioned goal as an example, listening passively to my target language for 2 to 3 hours a day is attainable for me personally. So depending on the time frame of the goal, I would adjust the total quantity, in this case hours of listening, to fit what I can do on a daily basis. So if the time frame is 2 months, then I would go with something in between 120 to 180 hours of listening to Japanese. Now, if I know that I can with relative ease listen to Japanese for 2 to 3 hours a day, then selecting a lower target, such as 30 minutes to an hour per day, would lead me to unnecessarily make less headway than I potentially could. So selecting a level that is slightly challenging, yet attainable, to do consistently on a daily basis is what we want. So it shouldn't be too easy and not too hard. The fourth point is that we want our goals to be relevant. So if we're talking about language learning, we want to make sure that whatever variable our goal is based on, for example hours of listening, it should be actually conducive towards us acquiring our target language. Now, different variables will be more or less conducive towards acquiring our target language. Variables such as listening, reading, doing sentence-based flashcards, etc., etc., will in general be highly conducive towards us acquiring our target language. Other variables will in general be less conducive towards us acquiring our target language for several different reasons, but keep in mind that how we engage with these activities, for example, how we listen and how we read, will also have an impact on how effective these activities are. So when it comes to reading, for example, as beginners, reading will be in general more effective if we use software that allows us to efficiently look up information that we need, such as the meaning and pronunciation of words and phrases. Examples of such software are link.com and ankiweb.net, and I will provide links to these programs in the description. And also when it comes to listening, compelling and fairly comprehensible audio will be more effective than, let's say, boring and highly incomprehensible audio. So to conclude, if your goal is to learn Japanese, a goal such as listen to Japanese for a total of 200 hours will be a more relevant goal than, for example, listen to Chinese for a total of 200 hours or watch 200 hours of anime with English subtitles. Now, some examples here are obviously more obvious than others, such as the extremely obvious example with Chinese that I just mentioned. while other examples may require some reasoning and knowledge of language learning principles to accurately position in the hierarchy of relevance for language acquisition. For example, comparing listen to the radio in Japanese for a total of 200 hours versus listen to audiobooks in Japanese for a total of 200 hours versus listen to short-form repetitive content in Japanese for a total of 200 hours. There aren't clear-cut answers here. It's contextual. So if you're a beginner or lower intermediate, for example, then listening to short-form repetitive content is generally better. But if you're advanced, then listening to long-form novel content, such as the radio or audiobooks, is generally gonna be better for you. Because as an advanced learner, long-form novel content will be comprehensible enough for you to benefit from. And the final point here is that we want our goals to be time-bound. So in other words, we want to have a deadline to our goals. And there are multiple reasons for this. Two of them are, the deadline is a tool that can allow us to adjust how challenging a goal is. So as mentioned earlier, we want our goals to be not too easy or too hard. And so using time frames as a tool, we can find a sweet spot in terms of how challenging the goal is, which will help us make the process of achieving the goal more enjoyable and effective. And the second point here is that having a time frame allows us to monitor our progress. So if my goal is to listen to Japanese for 180 hours in 2 months, and a month has passed and I've listened to Japanese for a total of 90 hours, let's say, then I know I'm on the right path. While if I've instead only listened for 45 hours after the first month, I might need to re-examine if my goal is attainable or further develop my process/system so that I can more easily get more hours of listening in per day. So in summary, we want to avoid open-ended goals and instead create goals that are constrained by a time horizon. So for example, the goal, listen to Japanese for 180 hours in 2 months would be a better goal than just listen to Japanese for 180 hours, because we've defined time constraint. So applying the SMART theory of goal setting on improving my listening comprehension in Japanese, I could end up with a goal such as listen to Japanese for 180 hours in 2 months. It's specific rather than general. It's measurable. It's attainable for me personally, i.e. it's not too easy and not too hard. It's also relevant, i.e. it's highly conducive towards improving my listening comprehension in Japanese. And finally, it's time constrained, i.e. I plan to listen to 180 hours of Japanese within 2 months. To summarize, if or when we set goals in our language learning, these goals should generally be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, this is the standard model of goal setting, but I would actually add 2 more principles to the standard model. And one of these principles I will be covering in my next video, where I will argue that we should attach hypotheses to our language learning goals, because this can help us to, over time, get a better grasp of cause and effect between different variables in our language learning. And this increased understanding of cause and effect will allow us to more effectively acquire our target languages, because we will no longer be grasping in the dark, being unsure of what sort of activity would lead us to what sort of level in our target language. So by testing different hypotheses, we can get a better picture of how much activity we need in certain languages to get to a certain level. And if we know what activity we need to get to a certain level in a language, we will be more in control of our progress, because we can then compress that activity to whatever time frame that we want, any time frame that is attainable and desirable for us. But I will go into more depth on this topic in the next video. So that's the end of this video, but if you have alternative views on goal setting as it relates to language learning, or if you would add any principles to the model that I described in this video, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear about your perspective. Thanks for listening and see you in the next episode.